Welcome back to the MDNGHT Collective podcast, where we are trading comfort for clarity and becoming the men that we were made to be. I'm Eddie, your host, and I'm glad you're here. Not just listening, but showing up for yourself. This conversation today is in line with what we talked about last week. It might feel a little direct, but not in a bad way. Just in the way that growth tends to feel heavy, and we finally stop avoiding what we've known deep down all along. Last time we talked about honesty, the kind that makes you squirm a little bit in your seat, the kind of honesty that doesn't just skim the surface but goes deep enough to actually mean something. And if you've been doing that work, if you've sat with the truth about where you are, then I respect you for it. That takes guts. It takes maturity. It takes willingness to stop performing and start rebuilding. But today, we're going to talk about something that comes after the truth. Because honesty alone doesn't change your life. Being real with yourself is just the first step. But it's not the finish line. What you do after that moment of truth, that's where the shift happens. See, a lot of men get into this place where they finally admit what's not working. The habits, the mindset, the patterns. And then they just stall. Not because they don't care. Not because they're not capable. But because the world is noisy. Life is full. And distraction is everywhere. And I'm not just talking about your phone. Sometimes distraction looks like scrolling, sure. Sometimes it looks like Netflix or TikTok, checking your email a dozen times in 1 hour. But sometimes it looks like work. It looks like overcommitting. It looks like convincing yourself you're too busy to change, when really you're just overwhelmed by the idea of starting. And it's wild how distraction today doesn't always scream at us. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sounds like, I'll get to it next week. Or, I just need to be in the right headspace first. I feel like I'm guilty of that one probably the most. I distract myself thinking that, I'll get to it when I feel better, when I feel more myself. Have you ever said that to yourself? I know I say it to myself all the time, maybe weekly. But let's be honest, half the time, we're not planning. We're not preparing. We're avoiding. We're stalling behind the comfort of almost ready. That's what we're going to break down today. How distraction hijacks your discipline and keeps you locked in loops that feel safe but lead nowhere. Because most men I talk to, they're not lacking motivation. They're not lazy. They're just worn thin, spread out, pulled in 20 directions, constantly reacting, constantly putting out fires, and constantly putting themselves last. And we've normalized that. We say we're tired, and we are. But what we're really tired of is spinning our wheels and never feeling like we're actually gaining any traction. So this episode is about taking the traction back. Not through hype, not through pressure, but through small, consistent shifts that are going to rebuild your trust in yourself. We're going to talk about how to get your focus back, how to reclaim your time, how to approach discipline not as punishment, but as a form of power. A personal rhythm that's going to keep you aligned with the man that you're becoming. Because freedom, the kind that gives you peace, clarity, and confidence, doesn't come from doing whatever you want whenever you want. It comes from being aligned with what actually matters. And if you've been stuck in loops of distraction, if you've been waiting for the right time to lock in, you've been busy but not fulfilled, this conversation is going to be for you. We're going to talk about how to break the loop, how to move forward, and how to do it without needing to feel ready. So let's get into it. So let's start with what we are up against. Not in the world, but in our own heads. Because the truth is, we're living in a time where distraction has become the default. And I'm not just talking about obvious stuff like your phone, social media, right? I'm talking about the way that we've all gotten used to avoiding ourselves. And we don't even notice it half the time. It just feels kind of normal now. Like we just get home and we just distract. So we don't have to deal with whatever happened that day or whatever we need to deal with later on that day. But do you ever just catch yourself going through the day on autopilot? You check your phone before your eyes are even fully open. You scroll through your content and you don't even really care about it. You hop from one app to one app, a tab to a tab, a task to a task. but you're not even really present for any of it. You're just moving. You're just escaping. And I get it. Life gets loud. Responsibilities pile up. Stress builds. You want relief. And the quickest way to get it is a scroll, a snack, a hit of some dopamine, anything to avoid sitting with whatever you don't want to feel. We all have our go-to escapes. For most people, it's binge watching TV shows, drinking, smoking, hooking up, staying busy with work, or even obsessively going to the gym. None of those things in and of themselves are evil. But when they become the thing that we reach for instead of facing what's real, that's when they start to take more than they give. See, we're not broken. We're just buried. Buried under layers of stimulation, numbing habits, distractions disguised as productivity. And when we're buried like that, it's easy to forget what it feels like to be grounded, focused, and clear. What happens over time is that we start to believe a small, quiet lie. It doesn't sound dramatic, which is why it's so dangerous. It whispers, "You can't handle this." So instead of confronting what hurts, we scroll. Instead of dealing with our doubt, we overwork. Instead of feeling lonely, we chase attention. And all the while, the part of us that actually needs the attention, that part of us aching to grow, it gets ignored. And here's the thing, you can handle it. You might not feel like it yet, but that doesn't mean you're incapable. It just means you haven't trained for it. That's where your discipline is going to come in. Not as punishment, not as pressure, but as practice. Discipline is just you choosing the hard thing, the real thing, a little more often than you choose the escape. That's it. It's that simple. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You just need to make small decisions that align with the man that you want to become. That decision might be putting your phone down when you're tempted to check it. It might be choosing to take a walk instead of hitting your vape. It might be sitting in silence for 5 minutes and just breathing instead of numbing out with noise. These small moments matter because every time you choose to face yourself, even in a tiny way, you're building that inner muscle. And over time, you'll start to feel different, stronger, clearer, more grounded. Not because everything is fixed, but because you're not hiding from it anymore. This isn't about being perfect. It's not about becoming some ultra-disciplined robot. It's about learning how to stop running from yourself, how to sit with discomfort without trying to numb it, how to choose truth over distraction, even when it would be easier to avoid it. So here's something to reflect on, and I don't mean it in a surface level, skip past it kind of way. I mean, really think about it. What are the escapes you reach for when life gets heavy? What emotions are you trying to dodge when you scroll or stay busy? And what would happen if, just for today, you sat with those feelings instead of running from them? Because that space, the one between distraction and decision, that's where your growth is going to live. And the more time you spend there, the more you remember you're not stuck. You're just used to escaping. And most of the time you're escaping something you're thinking doesn't really exist, right? You think that you don't have it in you. You think that it just comes out of nowhere. But now we're going to talk about the myth of that, the myth of motivation. So we're going to have an honest conversation about this one, about something that trips up a lot of men and a lot of us. And I mean a lot of us. It's this belief that we need to wait for the right moment to take action. And you've probably said it yourself. I definitely have said it myself. I'll start when I feel ready. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Like you don't want to do something halfway. You want to be in the right mindset. You want your routine to be stable, your energy and your plan to be set and correct. But let me ask you this. How many times have you waited for the right time to start something, only to realize that the time just never really came? That's the problem. The whole idea of waiting to feel ready is really a trap. Because the moment we're waiting for, that surge of motivation, that burst of energy, That sudden clarity where everything feels aligned, it's rare. And even when it does show up, it's temporary. Motivation does fade. Sometimes it's gone by the time you even finish scrolling your Instagram, and you've built your future on waiting for that moment to come back, and you're just going to stay stuck. The reality is, motivation is emotional. It's tied to your mood, your sleep, your circumstances, and your stress levels. And all of those things fluctuate day by day. So if you're waiting for the motivation to lead the way for you, what you're really doing is handing your future over to your emotions and hoping that they carry you somewhere productive. That's where discipline really is going to come in. Because discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't care if it's convenient. It doesn't care if your energy is high or if you're running on fumes. Your discipline is going to tell you, we made a commitment, let's follow through. It's structure. It's not a mood. When you start to lean into your discipline, especially on the days that you don't feel like it, that's when things are really going to start to shift for you. Not because it's sexy or impressive, but because it's consistent. Consistency isn't always pretty. And no, I'm not talking about some rigid, cold lifestyle where you're punishing yourself into progress. That's not what this is about. What I'm saying is that there's power in small intentional actions, even when your mind is screaming for you to delay it. It might look like waking up 15 minutes earlier, just to give yourself some quiet before the chaos of life starts. Maybe it's taking a cold shower, not because you want to, because honestly, who wants that? But because it reminds you that you can choose discomfort over purpose. It might be something simple like making your bed, putting your phone away when it's time to rest, drinking water instead of reaching for something that numbs you, or something that's just not good for you, or just doing the task you've been avoiding first. These things aren't revolutionary, but they're powerful because they build your self-trust. And that's the foundation so many of us are missing. It's not about discipline just for the sake of being productive. It's about becoming a man who does what he says he's going to do. Not when it's convenient, but when it's necessary. Because every time you follow through on something, no matter how small, you're reinforcing a new identity. You're proving to yourself that you can be trusted, that you can handle resistance, that you don't need the perfect mood or perfect moment to start. You just need yourself and a decision. And those decisions, they compound. Slowly, quietly, but over time, they completely shift the way that you're going to see yourself. So if you've been sitting around waiting for that perfect moment of motivation to burst, this is your invitation to stop waiting. Start with what you have. Do what you can when you can. Because discipline isn't something you feel, it's something you build. One honest, imperfect step at a time. And those steps are going to start to feel natural. They're going to get bigger gradually. And then you're going to start thinking about, what is my discipline actually going to give me? Well, there's this idea a lot of us grow up with, whether we realize it or not, that discipline is cold and punishing. Like if you live with discipline, you might not just enjoy your life. You're always grinding, you never smile, you're never relaxed. And to be fair, some of the content out there doesn't really help. It paints discipline like this never-ending boot camp. No rest, no softness, no slip-ups allowed. But here's what I've learned, and what I want to share with you if you're in the space that you're trying to figure out why you can't seem to get traction. Discipline isn't about restriction. It's not about beating yourself into submission or becoming hyper-productive just to feel valuable. What discipline actually gives you is freedom. And I know that might sound backwards at first, right? But hear me out. When you start showing up for yourself consistently, not perfectly, just consistently, you stop being a slave to chaos. You stop reacting to every little thing that life throws at you. You stop letting your mood or your inbox or your cravings dictate how your day goes. You start leading instead of chasing. Discipline gives you freedom from regret. It gives you freedom from that sinking feeling at the end of the week that you know you didn't show up the way you said you would. Not to anyone else, but to yourself. It gives you freedom from spirals, from inconsistency, from that fake confidence we all put on when we know deep down we're really trying to avoid something important. It gives you structure, and not the kind that boxes you in, the kind that gives you something solid to stand on when life feels like it's starting to spin. When everything around you feels unpredictable, discipline becomes the thing that you can control. It becomes your rhythm, your anchor. And it does something else that's just as important. It gives you some sense of pride. Not the ego-driven kind, but the grounded kind, the quiet kind. The kind of pride that comes from keeping your word to yourself, even when nobody's watching. Because let's be honest, most of us are really good at showing up for other people. We'll all meet deadlines, pick up the slack, we'll handle things for everybody else. But when it comes to us, our own routines and our own growth, our own healing, we're quick to push that off. Discipline's going to change that. It's going to bring out the focus, and it's going to bring it back to yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a responsible way. You're going to start saying, I matter enough to show up for myself. And when you start to believe that, everything's going to start changing. So if you've been seeing discipline as some heavy thing, I want to offer you a new perspective. It's not punishment. It's not pressure. It's proof. Proof that you're building something real. That you're moving forward even on the days you feel stuck. That you're creating the kind of life that doesn't fall apart when motivation disappears. Because the goal isn't to be perfect. That's a losing game. The goal is to be honest and consistent. To build momentum that you can trust. To become a man you can rely on, even when things get hard. That's what discipline is going to give you. Not control over the world, but control over you. And having control over you and yourself is going to grow into so many aspects of your own life, right? But one that I wanted to highlight is control over your romantic life, your love life, your heart, right? So we're going to talk about something that doesn't really get brought up enough when we talk about discipline. And that's how it shows up in your relationships, especially in dating. Most guys hear the word discipline and you're going to think, like we've talked about before, that it's this cold, hard, rigid process that only does everything you don't want to do. And yeah, those things can be part of it. But real discipline, it shows up in your ability to stay consistent when emotions enter the picture. It shows up in how you communicate, not just when things are good, but when things get tense or uncomfortable or uncertain. And it's the discipline to pause instead of react, to listen instead of defend, to stay present when everything in you wants to shut down and disappear. And let's be honest, a lot of us didn't really grow up seeing that being modeled in our lives. Maybe we saw other men who either exploded or completely checked out when things got real. Now, we're out here trying to build healthy relationships without ever being taught how to stay grounded in the middle of emotional chaos. And I'll speak to that personally. I didn't have any role models romantically growing up that were the kind of thing that I wanted to model my life after. So my own discipline in my own dating life or relationships has always come from experience. Experiencing one person, experiencing, the ups and downs of relationships and how they go. And discipline has come from those hard lessons. The lessons that you take from something or somebody that you say, wow, I never want that again. Wow, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, I completely should have handled that a different way. The discipline is going to come from those moments because it's going to take discipline to have the emotional control, not to suppress how you feel, but to how you respond with intention instead of reacting out of impulse. It's going to take discipline to show up consistently for somebody else, especially when you're tired, triggered, busy, or just bored, to make room for your partner's needs without abandoning your own, to set boundaries without guilt. And I think that that's something that we don't talk about enough is setting boundaries. You need your own moral boundaries. in your life, whether it comes from relationships or just other things, your boundary is going to be everything. Set your boundaries, stick to them. If you say that something is not a non-negotiable or you're not willing to put up with something, the minute that you do or you don't get that from somebody or you let your non-negotiables go by the wayside, that's not really your boundary, and it never was. So your boundaries are always going to tell you where your moral compass is and what you're willing to accept and not accept. And boundaries are just as important as anything else in a relationship. So setting those without guilt is something that has to take your own discipline to do, to set your boundaries and stick to them, to stay loyal, not just in action, but in your attention. And on the flip side of that, it also takes discipline to walk away when a relationship is no longer aligned with your values or your peace. Discipline isn't just about staying. Sometimes it's about knowing when you have to let go with clarity instead of chaos. So if you're dating or if you're in a relationship or just trying to become a better partner, ask yourself this: do I have the discipline to stay emotionally available even when it's uncomfortable? Do I have the discipline to keep showing up after the honeymoon phase fades away? Do I have the discipline to be honest even when it might cause conflict? Do I have the discipline to love someone in a way that reflects who I say I want to be? Because the truth is, your discipline is going to build safety. And safety is what allows intimacy to grow, not just in your partner, but in you. That's how discipline and dating connect. And it's not about control, it's about integrity. It's about being a steady man in a world full of distractions, options, and chaos, and choosing to lead yourself and your partner with presence and intention. That's real strength and real love. And that's what separates boys pretending to be emotionally available from the men who actually are. And when you find yourself in that struggle, it's going to frustrate you. And you're going to start to want to start over. And I know that's frustrating in itself. The part of you that feels tired of feeling like you always have to start over. Because if we're being honest about this, we've all been there. You've had that moment where you said, I'm ready to change. You wrote out the plan. You built that morning routine. You maybe even told a few people that this time it's going to be different. And for a while, it was. You woke up early. You got your workouts in. You drank your water. You shut out the distractions. Maybe even you got ahead on a few of your goals. And then, like it always does, life crept in. You missed a day because work got chaotic or your energy tanked. Then another day because you were tired and needed a break. And suddenly, the momentum's gone. And you're in that familiar place again, wondering how something that felt so clear just a week ago now feels so far away. That cycle right there, that's the one thing that breaks so many men. Not because we're weak, not because we don't want it badly enough, but because we think that we slip up and every time we do, it means we failed. That the missed workout or the day of distraction somehow erased all the progress that we made. So instead of adjusting or restarting, we quit. Not on purpose, not with a big announcement, quietly and slowly, and with a ton of shame. But that's the part that I want to reframe. And not to hype you up, but to remind you of something simple and honest. Falling off isn't failure. Staying off is. We've been conditioned to believe that discipline only counts if it's perfect. That if we don't hit every mark, we might as well not bother. But real discipline isn't about perfection. It's about the ability to come back from failure, to reset without self-hate, to pick it back up without making a scene, to move forward even if yesterday didn't go as planned. And that's the quiet decision to recommit, even when nobody's watching. And the more you practice doing that, not punishing yourself for slipping, but choosing to return to your rhythm, the more you start building something that lasts. Because let's be real, the guy who seems the the most disciplined aren't always the ones who never fall off. They're the ones who just train themselves to come back quicker, with less drama and less delay. So if you're sitting there in the place right now where you feel off track, I'm not going to tell you to grind harder or do more. I'm going to tell you to come back slowly if you have to, quietly if that feels safer, but come back. Start with the smallest thing that reminds you that you're in control again. One decision, one action, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to prove to yourself that you don't quit on you. Not anymore. Because the truth is, you don't need another fresh start. You just need to stop walking away every time it gets imperfect. This isn't about starting over, it's about learning how to keep going. Even when it's not clean, even when it's not sexy, even when you don't feel like you're crushing it. If you can do that, if you can stay in it, that's where the real growth is going to start showing. And I promise you, that's the version of yourself that's worth building toward. That part is our mission here, to build towards growth. So before we wrap this up, I want to bring this full circle. Not with a motivational quote or some big pitch, but just something that I hope you sit with for a second. Discipline has never been about turning yourself into a machine. It's not about controlling every hour of your day or grinding until you burn out. It's definitely not about being hard on yourself just to prove a point. What it really comes down to is this. It's about choosing your future over your feelings. Not because your feelings don't matter, but because your future does. It's about choosing clarity over chaos, choosing presence over avoidance, choosing to stay in the room with yourself instead of reaching for the thing that helps you escape. And look, no one's coming to save you. I wish it weren't like that, but that's the truth. No perfect moment, no sudden wave of motivation, no external force is going to carry you into the life you're meant to build. But here's the better version. You don't need saving. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're just buried. And once you start removing the distractions, the lies, the noise, you're going to remember that everything you need to get back to yourself is already there. You don't need a full-on reset. You need rhythm. You don't need a perfect plan. You need reps. You need to be honest about where you've been escaping and consistent in choosing not to anymore. That's it. And every time you show up, even in the smallest way, you're building towards something way bigger than a habit. You're building identity, integrity. You're building a version of you that you're not just proud of, but that you can trust in. So wherever you're at right now, whether you're just getting started, whether you're coming back from slipping off, or whether you've been quietly building and haven't seen results yet, stay in it. Don't let distraction talk you out of what discipline is trying to give you. You don't have to get it all right today. You just have to not give up on yourself. Let this be the week you follow through. Not for the perfect streak, not for the aesthetic, but because you said you would. And that's enough. But before you go, I just want to say thank you. Not in a podcast host kind of way, but in a real way. Thanks for choosing to be here. Not for choosing to listen to something that doesn't just entertain you, but hopefully challenges you a little bit. Invites you to reflect, to shift something. I know this stuff isn't easy to sit with all the time, but that's kind of the point. And if anything in this episode hit home for you, if it made you pause, made you think, or even made you uncomfortable, that's a good thing. That means that you're in the right place. And if this spoke to something that you've been carrying, or if you know another man or another person who's been stuck in his own distractions, I'd love for this to get passed along. Not as a, hey, you need this kind of thing, but as a me too kind of thing. Because we're not doing this alone. That's not how we build. We build together as a collective. So if anything in this episode resonated with you, hit me up on Instagram. We're pretty easy to find, right? At midnight_brand. That's where we're going to continue these conversations in between episodes. And that's where I want to hear from people. I want to hear from people doing the work. Because here, we're building something. Slowly, intentionally, together. So stick around. Subscribe if you haven't done that already. Drop a rating if this brought you any value. Those really help a lot. Drop a comment about the episode. And check back in next week. We're going to dive into a new conversation about perfectionism and how chasing the perfect image is actually keeping a lot of good men from becoming the real version of themselves. So until then, take care of your mind, take care of your body, take care of your word. And as always, we're here to build a legacy, one day at a time. This is the MDNGHT Collective, and I'll see you again next time.